it's Raven here, and I've got another deck building video for you. Finally, right? It's been like, I think like a month and a half since I posted a deck building video, and part of that's just been busy with school and whatnot, but the other part of it's, the game's been a little dead lately. I mean, not really many of my friends play anymore. A lot of the marshals on the forums, the moderators, I've heard from a lot of them, they're just sick of the game, sick of the forums, and I understand. I think everybody's kind of waiting for the DLC, and for my own part, I've kind of been holding off because there's been so many changes promised that are coming down the pipe. By the way, I have a little bit of news on the grapevine. You can look for the DLC in about 2 weeks. That's what I've heard, and I think that makes sense because I certainly would expect them to get the DLC out before Christmas, and then that gives them, if it's 2 weeks, it gives them a week or two to iron out any outstanding problems and resolve any crises that may emerge from the DLC releasing and breaking the game or anything. And then after that, the Frenchies can go on their 2-month vacation or whatever it is they do during the winter. And so yeah, I guess that's enough of that. We'll get to the deck now. First, I want to discuss Airborne decks a little bit in the abstract. This is an Airborne deck. This is my Soviet Airborne deck. But what I'm about to say applies to all Airborne decks, and that is, to have a good Airborne deck, you need 3 components. I'll list them here in annotations, but first of all, you need a great Air Force. For the Soviets, check. They have very powerful planes, very good selection. They have that handled. The second pillar of a good Airborne deck is powerful infantry. We have that too. We've got VDV 90. I'll talk more about infantry when I get to that section, but very solid infantry, some good specialist infantry. This is incidentally why I don't think the US deck makes a good Airborne deck, at least compared to the USSR, in that their infantry aren't very good by comparison. All they really get are riflemen and Delta Force, very low AT capabilities, not very versatile compared to a Russian Airborne. And finally, the third pillar of a good Airborne deck is ground transports. You can see here, actually, I'll talk about this more later as well, but I only have 1 helicopter card in an Airborne deck with 9 infantry cards, and a lot of people, when they see this deck, they think that's just crazy, but I'll explain that a little more later. The one exception to that rule is French Airborne. I feel French Airborne is probably the second most solid Airborne deck in the game, and they don't have any ground transports, just helicopters, but I think they're definitely way behind the USSR Airborne deck, and that's why I'm reviewing this deck. The USSR Airborne deck specifically, talking about that specifically now, it's really one of my favorite decks. I really enjoy it. I play this in, and not just in screw-around games, in competitive games, like real games, I'll take this in. And generally more 3v3, 4v4s, where I don't necessarily have to have my own section of the map. Maybe maps where it's not like I'll go to a zone and 1v1 some guy, and then all my teammates 1v1 their guy, and then we win that way. It's more maps where I don't have to focus on one area, and I can kind of play a quote support player. And no, I don't have the enormous artillery hordes or anything that maybe you traditionally associate with support decks, but I do have a lot of capabilities that are useful to my allies. For example, supply helicopters, great infantry support, gunships, a lot of gunships, a lot of airplanes. And so by maximizing these capabilities, mainly the infantry, the air power, and the supplies, I can give support to my allies and ensure air dominance, supplies, infantry hordes, kind of make up for weaknesses my allies have, allow them to spend points on other stuff, and really let them focus on winning their zone through my assistance. And this really is an assist deck, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. But just keep that in mind, that's the strategy here. It's not an all-in air assault cheese deck or anything like that. It's a real deck. It's meant to be played in real games, and it works really well. I really enjoy it. So let's just go into the units, I guess. To begin with, we have logistics, and of course I have command infantry. Very versatile, very useful. I've talked about them ad nauseum in other videos, but They're pretty good. I have Command Jeep as well, and you could certainly take the BMD commands, the BRDM2U, and that's fine. But the reason I have the Command Jeep is just feeding into that support playstyle with having these 100-point numerous cheap Jeeps I can send around to secure zones. Again, letting my allies spend their points on other stuff while I just sprinkle these around to make sure we get our zones. For supplies, you'll notice, well, there's no supply trucks. All you get are helicopters. I think that's a little ridiculous. I wish all airborne decks had access to supply trucks, ground-based supply vehicles. It's a very awkward. I mean, airborne decks in general are very restricted. They're supposed to be only stuff that's, quote, air transportable. But I think having Ural trucks wouldn't make or break the game. They really should have them, but in the meantime we're stuck with either MI6s or MI26s. And if you watched my USSR general deck, you would see that the MI26 is actually a superior choice just because it gets more supply per point, per card, per unit. It's just better in every way than the MI6. The only problem is that if you take the MI26, you only get 2 per card. You see the little 2 trained there for these. So I would only have 4 supply helicopters total in my deck. Versus if I take the MI26, I get 3 per card, which give me 6 total. And I figured that was more important to have, even though they're not as supply efficient, having more supply units total, just so I could not be as vulnerable to getting my helicopters sniped and be able to more cheaply supply my units, because that's the only way I can supply them is by helicopter. Now often what I'll do is I'll use these as kind of mini fob for myself and my allies, and then have my allies use their trucks to resupply from those and bring them to the front lines. And finally I have a fob. Fobs are really important, but they're even more important for airborne decks than probably most decks, just because I have so many gunships. All my supply units are helicopters, which need fobs to get the most out of them. Very vital to get these back, resupplied back to the front lines, get gunships back, rearmed, ready to go again. So fob, very necessary for an airborne deck, and also it's just nice, you're popular with your teammates for providing that extra capability. Infantry, we've got, again, this is the kind of strange section where I only have 1 helicopter card out of 9 infantry, and only when you see an airborne deck, it's all helicopter based, and everybody does an air assault on some place, and then that's it. That's your game. If you lose your air assault, you're screwed. It's definitely not the case here. You see, for one, I have Spetsnaz and BTRDs. Spetsnaz are great. They're good at killing infantry. They really support my VDV well, because the VDV themselves aren't that great against infantry. Their light machine gun isn't particularly powerful. What they have that's good is their Vampire, their rocket launcher. And so these VDV provide excellent anti-tank capability, and then units like the Spetsnaz or the Sappery kind of round out that capability with infantry killing. You see, I take 2 cards of VDV 90 in BTRDs, which are 5 points. I kind of hailed these in my general USSR video, but they're very nice. 5 points, 2 front, 2 side armor, 4,000 rate of fire quad machine gun for only, again, 5 points. Just very cost effective. And that's the reason I have this, is cost effectiveness. If I'm playing a regular Red 4 airborne deck and I'm taking all my infantry and MI8s, that's like 50-55 points per infantry squad, which is just so inefficient for an infantry deck. Infantry-centric deck, I should say. And that's why ground transports are so important for a viable airborne deck, because this allows me to get my infantry on target, not necessarily quickly, but in large numbers and for a cost-effective price, which allows me to spend more on planes and helicopters and all the other bells and whistles of an airborne deck. So you see I have my Spetsnaz and 2 VDV squads in the BTRDs. I also have a VDV 90 and MI8 MTV. This is actually a great helicopter. It's got 20 rockets, but they're 4 HE, so they'll just shred any soft-skinned or unarmored target, including infantry, just very quickly. They got 1 front and 1 side armor, just like MI24s. I think they're a really great value for 30 points. What this card is a either early insertion card, maybe send a pair of them up with my helicopters to hold ground while my slower forces catch up, or well, more usually just as a kind of quick reaction force, like I need infantry here 10 minutes ago, so I send my helicopters in with VDV to shore up the lines, essentially. I don't really do many air assaults, like I said, but if I was going to do an opening air assault, I would never need more than 9 infantry for that. And so this card covers that entirely, and that's why I don't have any other helicopters. You see, I also have 2 squads of regular VDV. These guys are just like their more modern brothers, the same anti-infantry capabilities for a much weaker rocket launcher, though still actually a decent launcher because it's accurate and it's long range. And I take these guys partly to get the BMD-3, and what the BMD-3 is, it's called the Boyava Machina Desanta, which in Russian is combat machine of the airdropped infantry, or it's not specifically paratroopers, I guess, but it's essentially an airborne BMP, which you might be more familiar with, and that's Boyava Machina Pichota, which is fighting machine of the infantry, which is, you know, more what the Motostrelki would use, or anyways, I don't want to get off in the weeds. This is the BMD-3. It's not as good as this is supposed to be air transportable, which is why it's in this deck. It's not. The BMP is not, and so it's not very well armored for an IFV. It's only 2 front, 2 side armor. It's got the Conquerors M, yeah, but only 3 of them. The autocannon's okay. It is nice just as fire support in rough terrain or forests, and I use it to support my infantry hordes. No, it's not the best. I think all BMDs are overpriced by at least 5 points, and they should come down. But it's a nice little capability. I like to have it, and frankly, I don't really have many other choices unless I take these guys in helicopters, which, as I said, I don't really want to do. So this gives me a little bit of a, albeit very lightly armored force, but a little bit of an armored force. Then I have Sappery, like I mentioned, purely anti-infantry capability. I like these guys over the Sappery 85 because, yes, the Sappery 85 have the same rocket launcher that the Spetsnaz have, but there's only 5 men per squad, and I don't like that very much. I think they're too vulnerable to artillery, too vulnerable to stray bombs and whatnot. They get suppressed. They die real easy. I'd rather have the 10 men with the flamethrower, which I consider a little more reliable anyways. You see, I take them in the Skreget, BTR ZD Skreget, which, similar to the regular BTRD, you see it's got 2 front, 2 side armor, the quad machine gun, and it also has a light AA gun on top, a little minigun there. It's not very accurate. It will just mainly scare helicopters rather than hurt them, but it is a great gun for infantry support, so this is kind of a armored, high firepower vehicle to advance with my Sappery and just add to that anti-infantry capability. A great synergy between those two. You see, I kind of, the same thing with my Iglas. Iglas are really great manpads, by the way. They're probably the 2nd best in the game behind the French Mistrals. They come with a Skreget as well because just a little bit more anti-air capability to sit with them in a bush and help protect them, or just stun helicopters that get really close. And Conquerors M, yeah, I don't really like ATGM infantry. I've maligned them in past videos, but for a VDV deck, it does add needed anti-tank capability to my deck. And yeah, they come in robots. I guess that's how the Russian robots, who knows, which themselves are kind of worthless. I mean, they have the 2 front, 2 side armor, the nice machine gun, sure, but you're paying 10 points for a crappy ATGM, which, if nothing else, it's just another ATGM trail streaming out of the bushes to scare an enemy off. And admittedly, part of the reason I used the robot in the Skregets is just because I ran out of BTRD. You see, 0 out of 3. And so these are kind of the alternatives, and that's the only way I could really bring these guys without taking them in MI8s, which, again, that just gets so inefficient. And you have all these helicopters flying around that all you can do is send them in a blob to die and rocket down stuff like a jerk off. So yeah, moving on to support. There's not. First thing you'll notice is the Russians have an enormous assortment of support options in a regular deck and only 6 in an airborne deck. The Grad MLRS rocket launcher. I don't think this is air transportable, but it's in the deck. I don't particularly like it. The rockets are kind of weak. Very hard to supply, which is important because remember you don't have any supply trucks, so it's kind of a logistical nightmare to keep these firing. I think you have to always run them back to the base or have one more thing for your helicopters to resupply. You have the Strela 1M, which I think is kind of useless. Don't like it. Low accuracy, relatively low AP, low range, only 4 missiles. This is the biggest problem. Is statistically speaking, you'll fire all 4 of these missiles at a target and maybe kill one target if you're fortunate, depending on what it is. And you've got this useless unit that's just eating supplies. It's not very robust and reliable, which is an important aspect in a VDV deck, because again, the supply difficulties I was talking about. That's why I take the Strela 10M. Very good mainline red 4 AA piece. Kind of okay accuracy, but it has 12 missiles, longer range, the all-important 5 HE that allows it to 2-shot jets and helicopters. Just very good unit. I have 2 cards of them. That's my main AA unit along with my Iglas. Though I do use a lot of aircraft-based anti-air, my planes, my helicopters. Those are important components of my air defense network too. For artillery, you see there's two real choices here. There's the Nona SVK and then the regular Nona. The regular Nona is actually on a BMD chassis, which is the transport I was talking about earlier. And the other Nona is just on the BTR chassis. So it's faster. The one I chose is the SVK, by the way. It's faster, yes. It's got a machine gun for whatever that's worth. Otherwise, it's just got a little bit of a better gun. 2 front armor. It's the only thing is you get less per card, and it's a little bit more expensive, of course. But that's okay. I take 2 cards hardened for 6. That's probably enough. You could take 2 cards trained for 8. That would definitely be enough. These are very powerful. 5 HE, nice dispersion. They can really, like a small platoon of them can snipe a lot of units, AA, infantry, whatever it may be. And of course I use them for smoke. The only other option is the Ural truck, which actually has the same gun, I believe, as the Skrzhet. So why would I take that when I have Skrzhets all everywhere anyways, you know. Tanks, there's actually no tanks. Look at that, like, I guess the Russians don't have any air mobile T-80UMs yet, unfortunately. Recon, I used to have the Razvedka purely because if you look on their unit card, they have a little blue and white pinstriped VDV shirt. But the Spetsnaz Gru are just so good. I don't like that you can only take them in trucks if you want them cost effectively, but whatever. I'm trying them out. BRDM-3, decent vehicle. It's more there for its autocannon and cavalry exploitation capabilities than it is for actually seeing stuff and looking at stuff. At least for me. You could certainly get the Plumaya for exceptional optics, which would be a nice thing to put in bushes and look at stuff. Some of these other random vehicles like little tankettes, I don't care for those too much, but you can definitely experiment. Just like my general USSR deck, I have an Mi-2 helicopter, which is just cheap eyes, very good optics for only 40 points, air mobile. Then I have the Kamal 52, which is the Seed anti-AA helicopter with Iglas, and it's got stealth, exceptional optics, it's very fast. It's a nice little, just for seed missiles if nothing else, there's a lot of unique capabilities. See, I do take it hardened instead of trained, so I have more accuracy on its missiles, because it only gets 2 seed missiles. That's pretty important to hit them. I've actually completely destroyed enemy starts just on the basis of having this, like, for example, a West German start coming up the road at me with 2 Gepards. This is only AA. I kill both Gepards, and then my helicopters rocket down everything. You don't always get that, but it can certainly turn the tide of an early engagement, so I often start with one of these. You could also take the Mi-24K. I don't particularly like it. I think it's a little too expensive for not having a missile. It does have nice rockets. Yes, it has a yak cannon. That's nice, but I think generally the Camov is a lot better value, more versatile. Vehicles, well, the Conqueror's M, nice anti-tank capability. I don't particularly like this vehicle, but it's a nice add-on for my USSR deck, or excuse my USSR Airborne deck. Provides the anti-tank punch. ASU-85 is actually a authentic VDV, I guess, assault gun that they would drop in and help the VDV. It's kind of a predecessor to the BMD as I understand it, but you see it's a 1959 unit. Just very cheap, very nice support. It has for 10 points, a 9 HE kinetic energy gun that scales up damage as you get close. Just brutal fire support and force. Very nice to have. Just some other, I mean, everybody's kind of thinking about the Zalo. I said this in my USSR general video, but I hate the Zalo. It's just a piece of, it's overrated as hell because it's got the 20 rounds per minute. 7 AP is too low to kill anything in one shot except at very close range. Bad stabilizer, so you can't take advantage of its actual fast wheeled chassis. You have to stop to fire to hit anything. Low accuracy to begin with. I just really don't like this unit. I think it's ridiculously overrated. I wouldn't take it if I were you, but I guess as always, feel free to experiment. There's some other things, like this would be a good infantry support gun, but like I said, I have the Scretics, I have the BTRDs, I don't really need a fast-firing machine gun vehicle. And of course, there's various jeeps you can take, coilless rifle, helicopters. This is one of the most important parts of the deck. You can see I kind of chose all of the good ones, quote. I have the regular Akula. It's got the powerful missiles, the Iglas. I don't usually start double Akula. I usually start Recon Akula and a Mi-24, but this is a nice unit as well. Mi-24Vs, they have 8 Igla missiles. They're very good air defense, mainly dissuading enemy helicopters or protecting your own airborne rush. Yak cannon's really good at dealing with infantry and helicopters. Rockets to rocket down maybe enemy infantry trying to land in their helicopters like their Hueys. Have a very versatile gunship. My favorite gunship, the Mi-24 VP, it's got this auto cannon that, as you can see, it's probably hard to see, but it's got a mount on the front that allows the gun to swivel. So this is true for the Mi-24V as well. You see the Yak cannon rotating. This means it doesn't have to actually be facing directly at a target to shoot, so that gives you a lot of extra time shooting, whereas otherwise you might have to do this elaborate move with your helicopter where it kind of slows down and then faces the target and then finally starts to shoot. Very high rate of fire, very powerful autocannon, powerful rockets, 2 HE, 80 rockets. It's really nice, high accuracy, high damage, high range missile. Just very nice, very versatile helicopter. I'll almost always start with one of these and use it in a fire support role. Mi-28 is kind of a big brother to the Mi-24 VP. It's actually not very good, I don't think. It's got basically the same missiles, a little more accurate, has double the missiles, but no more anti-tank capability. Has an autocannon, which as you can see swivels, so it has that important fire. How do I say that? It can fire without having to point directly at an enemy, so that is nice. It's very high accuracy, high AP compared to the VP. Less rockets, but more powerful. It's just, I feel like it's very much a side grade for 30 more points. So you're paying, 30% more for something that does essentially the same thing. And I really only have it just for the hell of it, I guess. I kind of ran out of alternatives. I don't actually like the 24P because you see it's armed like the VP, except it's got 4 less missiles. And right here on the side, this is its cannon. You see it's mounted on the side of the helicopter, which means, like I was talking about, it has to actually face its enemy as opposed to having the ball-mounted gun here that can swivel. So this takes a lot longer to fire its autocannon. Not as useful. I don't really like it as much. But yeah, these are really important. These helicopters, they're kind of the bread and butter of the gameplay. You use these to support your infantry, support your allies, and especially in the early to mid game where AA nets aren't as saturated, they can be very decisive forces. And finally, airplanes. This is like the other decisive part of the deck. You know, you're really trying to focus on air dominance for your team and close air support to pound the enemy and eliminate enemy AA, heavy tanks, whatever it is. I have two Su-27 PUs. I got a nice skin for it as well. I think I have it linked in my USSR general video. These are basically the high-level, high-tier, you know, top-of-the-line ASF, air superiority fighter. Very solid, very nice to have. Fire and forget long-range missiles. Big brother, the Su-27S, which is a similar aircraft, not as nice ECM. The missiles are semi-active rather than fire and forget, which means that it has to be pointing sort of at its target to hit the missiles, and if the 27S dies before its missile hits, the missile will miss, as opposed to the Su-27 PU, where it can die and its missile will still hit, regardless of whether or not the plane is alive. But it's this car, the Su-27S, is an affordable, almost top-line interceptor. I also have the Su-27M, very expensive, very nice anti-tank rocket. It's probably the best tank buster in the game. Has these very nice long-range Vimple missiles, just like the PU. Fire and forget, very accurate long-range. Nice ECM. This is probably the only real multi-role fighter in the game, because it has the tank busting capabilities, and then these missiles allow it to also punish enemy fighters and bombers. I use this as kind of a shoestring interceptor when I haven't been able to afford a PU yet, or my PU is down. Very nice, very versatile unit, just have to be very careful with it. For more mainline ground support, I have the Su-25, 4 powerful rockets, 4 nice missiles, granted semi-active. It's got a nice tank busting gun, slow, low ECM, but armored. You have to be careful with this too. You don't want to send it into too AA-rich an environment, but it does have its moments, and it can provide a lot of firepower, and it's also very versatile. It can target tanks and infantry equally well. I do really like it. I like it a lot more than the 25T, which has these useless sidewinders, because you're never going to be close enough to use those generally on for a Rafale coming at you. 16 missiles, low AP. I don't like this plane at all. Too expensive, 200 points, so I take the cheaper one. And the MiG-29S, it's just a bomber. High ECM, high speed. This is a bomber that actually comes home a lot. It gets its bombs off and makes it back to the airfield, as opposed to a lot of bombers that kind of tend to be a throwaway craft. Really like this, powerful bombs. It's a good close air support. It's also a little more precision. There's only 4 bombs. They're high explosives, 500 kilograms, and so you're kind of more for targeting important units or condensed blobs of infantry, while the Su-24M, it's got 30 bombs, 30 250 kilogram bombs, huge spread. So this is more saturation to stun a big wave of units, or maybe kill infantry filling up a town, or maul them at least. And then I have SEED. I have the MiG-25BM and the Su-24. Those are the USSR's only SEED planes, and you can only get 1 card of each, so I've taken both of them. SEED is extremely important for this deck for suppressing enemy air defense, which is what SEED means incidentally, suppression of enemy air defenses. You use these to kill Gepards, Patriots, whatever it might be, to protect your planes, and of course your gunships to allow them to get on target and do the damage. So these are really key units for the deck. You have to be careful with them, you have to learn to manage them well, but they're very good at protecting your maybe softer, less ECM'd air units. And see any alternatives. I talked about I don't like the IL-102. It's got low ECM, it's slow, it's a bomber that doesn't tend to come home, in my opinion. It dies a lot just because, again, slow and low ECM, even though it does have armor. Let's see what else. MiG-27K, very popular tank buster. I personally don't like it because it only has 2 missiles. I find it to be somewhat unreliable. You can often miss one or even both missiles, and then you've sacrificed a 145 point plane for nothing. But a lot of people really like this craft. You could definitely experiment with it. MiG-31M, this is a real interceptor. It's got 12,000 meter range missiles. I don't like it because it's got low accuracy. It takes a while to fire the missiles. Only 1 per card. I'd much rather have one of these ASFs. And finally, the Yak-141. It's a good choice for another ASF, but since they changed the pricing on this, it's only 10 points less than the Su-27S, which has, granted, the 27S doesn't have fire and forget missiles, but it has more of them, which is important. With the Yak-41, a lot of times you'll fire all your missiles and your target won't be dead against a high ECM target. The Su-27S doesn't have that problem. The PU certainly doesn't have that problem. So, while the Yak-141 is a great plane, it's just not quite reliable enough in my opinion, so I don't have it anymore. And yeah, I think that's my VDV deck. Like I said, I really enjoy it, but it has a kind of specific play style, that kind of supporty air commander type thing with infantry, and I'm going to post a couple videos about it, either live gameplay or maybe replay casts of how to use it, what to do, but I would really suggest people just take a look at it, maybe try it out. If you have any questions, certainly leave them in the comments. I love little love notes. And yeah, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, leave kisses. And that's about all I have today, so thanks again. This is Raven, signing off.